NSA surveillance under fire. Both sides of the aisle on Capitol Hill and the American public want answers into exposed programs used to collect phone and internet records. But one senator is calling for an end to the so-called grandstanding. That's Indiana Senator Dan Coats. And we're sitting down with him today to talk NSA, immigration, and other issues facing Washington, D.C. and a mass exit for Republican leaders in Indiana. The party is getting ready for a major transition. Plus, our political insiders debate. It's all coming up on this edition of Indianapolis This Week.
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
And welcome to Indianapolis This Week. I'm Erica Fly. Capitol Hill is a busy place right now. Congress is focused on immigration reform while anger swirls about the NSA surveillance program. An Indiana senator is in the middle of both fights. Norman Cox is with Senator Dan Coats.
Joining us now is Senator Dan Coats, Indiana's senior senator, a Republican who began serving in Congress in 1981 until 1999, then came back as a senator in 2011. Welcome, Senator Coats.
Thank you.
One of the big issues that you've been concerned about is the NSA and the monitoring. We talked recently about that, and your support for the monitoring program, you've written now an op-ed piece defending it. Are you getting resistance from this?
First of all, I understand people's concerns about breaches of their privacy. The government has failed them, this administration has failed them in many ways. The ever-changing story about what happened in Benghazi, the IRS scandal, which is outrageous, and heads ought to roll on that one. There are several others, Fast and Furious and so forth. So the public has a very deep level of distrust toward anything being said out of Washington. And here you have a program that is basically highly classified, very secret, extremely effective in terms of getting results. But people say, hey, is this just another thing where they're listening in to us and so forth? I serve on the Intelligence Committee. This thing is layered with oversight to protect the privacy of Americans, but it's essential to also protect their security. And we've now been able to release, unfortunately, have to release, but we need to do it to assure people that we're not doing what some people think we're doing.
Why did you write the
I wrote the op-ed because there's so much misinformation, and I think some of it may be even deliberate, to fan the flames of you can't trust these guys. Look, our committee oversees this, the House committee oversees this. It is layered with oversight through the agency, through the government, with a special court. And in serving on that committee, we spend hours and hours and hours making sure that it does not invade people's privacy, but these new technological tools have allowed us to determine who terrorists are talking to in the United States, who they're talking to among each other, and we've stopped over 50 terror attacks against the United States.
Is one of the reasons that you wrote this article, perhaps you're getting blowback from Republicans, because when President Bush would do things like this, the Democrats would scream. Now that President Obama is doing it, it's the Republicans. Are you maybe getting a little askew with your own party members here?
No, I think when it comes to national security, it transcends politics. I don't think I should weigh my response on the basis of whether this is popular or not, or whether people even take my position. I just want to make sure the facts of the program are made transparent to the American people. We have to do this. There's a downside, because not only are the American people hearing what we're saying in terms of justifying how we oversee this program, but our enemies also, and they can work around. And as General Alexander, who runs this program, said, we have compromised our capabilities. It could result in attacks now, because they'll bypass what they know to bypass that they wouldn't have before, and people could die.
Should we have done this then? I mean, this is the first time since 9/11 we've really heard a lot about this. We've heard about a possible attack on the stock exchange, a possible bombing of the subway system. Well,
we had to do it because some people were saying we ought to disassemble this whole product that we're using here to do this, and so we've had to assure the American people that we are not doing what some of the people who are really mischaracterizing this are saying. We are not listening to their phone calls. If the only people who are losing their privacy are people who are talking to known foreign terrorists, and those numbers connect, and even then, all we know is these two numbers connected. A terrorist, maybe in Yemen, a terrorist maybe in Pakistan, wherever, and somewhere in America here. And the ones that turn up usually are their sources over here. And that then, we go to a court and we present the evidence, just like the police go and say, you know, we really got a lot of evidence to think that we ought to search this guy's house. And a court decides whether or not that's reasonable, and then they give them a warrant. The same thing happens here, and there have been very few of these, but the ones that we have been able to have the court approve of have proven to be attacks which we've been able to prevent. Keeping the American people safe and protecting their privacy are not incompatible.
Talking about these specifics, maybe built some public support, do you think?
I hope so, because releasing these facts, I think, hopefully will help people understand exactly what we're doing, but more importantly, what we're not doing. Again, there's a downside. The downside is we compromise secret programs, and we're not the only ones, Americans aren't the only ones listening to what we say. Our enemies are, and they look then, oop, I better not do this because I might get caught.
What's been talked about has mostly involved New York, which, as we know, has been ground zero for a lot of this stuff. Are you at liberty to say whether any of these thwarted attacks may have involved Indianapolis, Indiana, or at least this part of the country?
I'm not at liberty to disclose where all these incidents have taken place, but I think I can say that Hoosiers ought to feel secure. Okay. But none of us can feel secure, Norm. As we've seen, whether it's Oklahoma City, whether it's New York, this is not just New York, Washington. The more we tighten things there, maybe the more they look elsewhere. So always vigilant is the most important thing we can do.
The other big issue pot-boiling right now in Washington is the immigration bill. We talked recently, and you want tighter border controls before you're willing to let these people go on a path to citizenship. Within the last 48 hours, Senator McCain and Senator Corker and some of the people have put together a compromise. I believe it has about 18 new drones, 20,000 new agents, 350 miles of new fencing. Is that enough to satisfy the problems that you've had with this?
That's a major step forward. I supported a John Cornyn from Texas proposal, which I thought was much better.
Which is not going to get voted on.
Harry Reid wouldn't even allow us to have a vote on it, and I'm very upset about that because it's a better proposal than this one, and it addresses the question, the issue better.
But can you live with this one?
I can live with this if the headlines are correct, but what's happened is that Harry Reid has now made it the vehicle to move the bill forward. And we've heard now in the last 24 hours, Democrats in particular have dumped a whole bunch of amendments in there. It hasn't been provided to us yet. It was supposed to be yesterday, last evening. As of midnight, it wasn't provided. I want to read the fine print. Ronald Reagan taught me trust but verify, and we want to verify. It smells a little bit like health care when
Senator
they dumped a bunch of stuff in at the end.
Senator McCain says anybody who can't support this agreement, that their real issue wasn't really border security to begin with. Is that a fair comment?
Well, I know obviously he's trying to sell his amendment. On the surface, absolutely. What's in the headlines, that's a big step forward on border security. Let's find out what else is in there so that we don't find this out. And this famous Nancy Pelosi quote, we'll learn about it after we pass the law. So I don't want to be in a rush to pass this thing. I want to make sure what is and what isn't in there first. And then I also have a problem with the fact that this, like the Cornyn bill, which I was so disappointed that Reid wouldn't let us vote on, this basically said, make sure that stuff is there and works before we just go forward on a promise. McCain goes forward on a promise to do this, giving people status. I would like to verify that what's put in place works before we give that status.
We have about 15 seconds left. This week there was a house cleaning at the Republican State Committee. Eric Holman's out as chairman. You have hired him as your state chief of staff.
Yes.
Is this an indication that you're running for re-election?
It's an indication that I've been gifted with bringing on someone that is fully experienced and understands. And Mitch Daniels, chief of staff, and ran his operations. It's a real gift to me. A terrific guy, Mike McMahon, has been running my office way beyond the time that he anticipated. We've set up a wonderful organization. I brought on a superstar. I got the #1 draft pick here, and I'm just happy to have Eric on board and looking forward to working with him the next 3.5 years prior to 2016.
All right. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Senator Dan Coates.
And more about what Norm was talking about right there, a major shakeup coming to the leadership of the Indiana Republican Party. State Chairman Eric Holcomb is stepping down, as we mentioned, along with a handful of others. We are sitting down with Party Communications Director Pete Seat after the break. Changes are coming to the leadership of Indiana's Republican Party. The state chairman, along with a handful of others, will be stepping down. Eric Holcomb is resigning and preparing for a number of leadership changes. Holcomb's final day as chairman will be on July 9th. Also stepping down will be Executive Director Justin Garrett. Former Lieutenant Governor Becky Skillman will step down as National Committee woman, and Vice Chair Sandy Huddleston will take over as acting chairwoman, but will then step away once a replacement is chosen. Joining us now is the Communications Director of the Indiana Republican Party, Pete Seat. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure you have been a busy man these last few days since those changes were announced. I want to ask you, what does it mean to have Eric Holcomb step down and join Coates' staff?
Well, it's great for Senator Coates. I used to work for the senator on his 2010 campaign. I think this is a great natural move for Eric, really, who has helped establish the Indiana Republican model here in the state and help Senator Coates take that to our nation's capital when we're tackling these major challenges that we face. I know Eric is excited about it. Senator Coates is excited about it. Of course, at State Party, it's a little bittersweet because we'd prefer that Eric stay with us, but this is the right move at the right time for him.
And the Republican Party offices are losing more than just Eric, as we stated, also 3 other leaders. How will this massive transition actually play out?
Well, you know, there's no perfect time for a transition like this, but in an off-year election, there's no elections in the whole state of Indiana. With our legislative session having concluded, this is the time to do it, and to allow Governor Pence to put in his team, the folks that he'd like to have in there, to move the state party forward to bigger and better things.
Is it a complicated transition system, the way that this works, or is it pretty smooth and easy?
Well, you hope it's smooth and easy. And typically, by tradition, the way it works is the governor, a Republican governor, would signal his intention or recommendation for who he would like to see as chairman, and the state committee, who will be a part of this process, Governor Pence is already soliciting their thoughts and ideas before he makes a recommendation. Will approve that, hopefully, with some discussion, and in the next several weeks we'll have a new state party chair.
Any names floating around out there?
Well, you know, plenty of people are speculating. That's not my job to do, but what you do see with all these names being thrown out there is there's a deep bench of talent in the Indiana Republican Party, and a number of people who would step in and hit the ground running.
So soon, both the Democratic Party chairman and Republican Party chairman will both be fairly new in their jobs. What kind of effect will this have overall? I
think it's great for the state of Indiana. I mean, we have had a lot of turnover in our congressional delegation. On the Republican side, the most senior member, seniority-wise, is Marlin Stutzman, who was just elected in a caucus in November of 2010. So it's great for the state to have some new blood and some new fresh ideas, both in D.C. representing us and here in the state at the party level.
Some people were shocked when this news came out about all the changes. Should we have been shocked, or did we see this coming in some way, shape, or form?
It was coming. Again, with the legislative session, Eric and others had agreed to stay. You know, it's a little in the weeds, but our reorganization, when we choose new county chairs, district chairs, and state chair, happens at the beginning of March, which is smack dab in the middle of a legislative session, which is not a very good time for this type of transition to take place. So folks who are looking to go to the private sector and try their hand at something new decided, out of respect for the party, the governor, and what we've accomplished, to stick around for a little bit longer, and now's the time to make the move.
You talked about the governor making his recommendations. Does Governor Pence really have a major impact on this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but he is playing it the right way, and that is soliciting ideas and opinions from the state committee, from key supporters of his and others, and getting their thoughts on who they believe should run the Indiana Republican Party moving forward. And I'm confident that he's going to make a great choice coming up.
And you, my friend, are going to be quite busy for days to come.
I will, just a little bit.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Coming up after the break, our political insiders are weighing in on the changes for the Republican Party, along with NSA surveillance and immigration reform. Stay with us. And joining us now are 2 of our political insiders, editor of IndyPolitics.org, Abdul Hakim Shabazz, and Democrat Kip Tu. Some very big news this week with the leadership of the Indiana Republican Party changing, soon completely changing, really. One of the most surprising developments, Eric Holcomb actually becoming Senator Coates' chief of staff. Anything to take away from that move?
A couple of things I think to take away from the move. Number one, I think people made too much of the announcement. I think the announcements were coming for a while. Maybe they mishandled the rollout, but I'm not too surprised that Holcomb wants to move on. And it is surprising that Senator Coates is taking him on as his Indiana chief of staff. I think it does send a very clear signal to all the Republicans running around trying to replace him that hold off, fellas, I'm here to stay for a while.
I will agree the way it all happened, maybe not necessarily the best way you want to do it, but seeing how Republicans had a very orderly transition, like what my good Democratic friends went through with their chairman just a little while ago, this was actually pretty easy, not unexpected, even though sort of everybody leaving at one time was a little bit eyebrow-raising.
All right. Lawmakers grilled CTB McGraw-Hill on Friday over the problems with ISEP testing this year, and the representative for the company apologized. Now the state wants more than $600,000 in damages. Will they get it, guys?
I think they have a really good chance. I was sat through most of that hearing on Friday, and the one thing that the CBT McGraw-Hill people, they admitted early on, we made a mistake, we screwed up, but they also tried to diffuse the situation, saying we weren't necessarily negligent, saying we did all our testing that we were supposed to do, and none of our tests revealed that we would have this problem. Now, tell that to the kids whose tests are going to be messed up, but I think the state has a really good shot at getting that $600,000. What McGraw-Hill's afraid of is losing the $24 million contract altogether.
I agree with Abdul. It's terrible we're agreeing on the first two questions. Hopefully
What's going on here?
Hopefully they get more than the $600,000, and hopefully there's a way to get out of the contract because they've completely botched it.
Let's talk about this. The mayor this week vetoed a plan from the City County Council.
Now we're about to disagree.
Vetoed that plan to put 100 more officers on the street. Instead, that he says that his staff can actually come up with a plan to move those from behind the desk onto the street. Is this a plan that you think is going to work?
Well, let me say, I think it's similar to what Straub said to try to get him out of a political crisis during the campaign for mayor. So it's the same rhetoric 2 years later. And it seems to me that it's just an answer to what was a bipartisan vote in the City County Council to a crisis. And the mayor seems to me be jumping from crisis to crisis, no long-term planning, throws this out here after the council makes this vote. Seems to me that it's clear that that vote struck a nerve on the 25th floor and they felt like they had to respond.
Real quick, Abdul, first.
First of all, real quick, Troy Riggs, the public safety director, for months has been looking at efficiencies with IMPD to see how they can get more officers on the street without asking to spend the taxpayers more money. Number two, the Democratic plan that was passed, you wouldn't see
an bipartisan plan.
You wouldn't see an officer for a year because that's how long it takes to train, get people on the street. And number three, even if you did allocate the $6 million under IMPD's contract, they're entitled to get raises, but they couldn't get raises because the money wasn't there. So once again, the Democrats are bad at math, just like they are bad at everything else.
Once again, he's ignoring the fact that it was a bipartisan vote that I think, constituents are talking about the rise in the murder rate. It's a serious crisis in the city of Indianapolis, and the mayor's only in response mode. He's not in aggressive.
Look at the last 5 murders this city has had, and you had 300 police officers on the street. It would not have made a difference. These are people who know each other. They have criminal records. It's going to sound really bad and cruel, but for the most part, our murders have been lately. It's mope shooting mope.
I was going to point that out. You actually wrote an article this week talking about that more police officers likely wouldn't stop the homicide rates in communities.
Right.
But the trend in the United States is that murders are going down in almost major American cities, and they're not here. I don't think it is fair to take the last 5 murders and say, see, the cops wouldn't help. The cops would help.
I'll take the last 50 murders. I'll take all 50 murders.
Then why is the mayor proposing putting 100 more officers on the street? Because it makes a difference. So your argument falls flat.
You're not going to stop people from shooting each other over a fight at a strip club at 3 o'clock in the morning at 38 Lafayette.
I don't dispute that. But the point is we need more cops on the street. Even the mayor agrees with that.
We'll agree we need more police officers on the street. But if you guys think that more police officers on the street are going to stop these type of homicides, you're actually it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. Spend some time in the hood. What the problem is, you have young black men with criminal records in their 20s who are popping caps at each other and using guns to solve their disputes. It is just that simple.
So we need more gun control?
And no amount of police officers is going to stop that.
More gun control and more cops,
what you need to do is strengthen families and stop having people pop out menaces to society every other day, and so they don't grow up to be the people that we have to deal with later on.
We need to fund crime prevention stuff as well to a greater extent. There's a lot of problems with it, but I think everybody agrees we need more police officers on the street. street, and he's just making excuses why they don't need to.
No, we're going to do it in a responsible manner. What the Democrats want to do is basically take money and use one-time money for an ongoing expense, which is bad management, which is what got us to the city, the fiscal mess it was in the first place years ago.
I remind you one more time, it was a bipartisan vote on the City County Council.
We'll move on to a final issue right now in our final
I told
minutes.
you we disagree.
Let's talk about this. The push for immigration reform in Washington right now. Republicans presented a new plan this week. Do you think that we were actually any closer to getting anything passed?
I was hopeful until I saw what happened with the Farm Bill this week on the House side. Both Democrats and Republicans were hopeful that the Farm Bill was going to pass, and when it came up, it didn't have the votes to pass. I think the House of Representatives right now is the more dysfunctional than the people on Arrested Development. I mean, it is just a complete, utter mess, and they can't seem to function. The Senate seems to be functioning okay. They're getting bills out, but the House is just a complete dysfunction.
I think you'll get something out of the Senate. They're looking at possibly 70 votes with the latest moves to beef up border enforcement. The question is going to be is what happens in the Republican caucus. Speaker John Boehner has said that nothing will happen on immigration reform unless they have a majority of the majority. And I think that might actually, in a weird way, be the hope that if he can get enough of a majority of Republicans and enough Democrats to go along, they can get the immigration reform and bypass the more ideological extreme wing of the House Republican caucus.
The only way the bill's going to pass is if John Boehner sort of steps aside and lets what's called the Hastert rule, which is it has to be a Republican majority before he put it on the floor. If he lets that go by the wayside, it may pass.
See, I think just the opposite. He might actually get it.
All right. Gentlemen, always a pleasure being here with you.
What a way to start summer.
Thank you so much. And stay up to date on our political news anytime by following our insiders, Laura, Jennifer, Kip, and Abdul on our Capitol Watch blog. You can find the link on our webpage, theindychannel.com. Indianapolis This Week continues after the break. It is State Fair season across the state of Indiana, and today the Marion County Fair is in full swing. Today is Big Brothers Big Sisters Day at the fair. Gates are now open and will stay open until 11 p.m. tonight. The Midway and Expo Hall will be open from noon until 11 p.m. tonight. The Expo Hall will open at noon. The Marion County Fair runs through Saturday, June 29th. Thanks for watching this edition of Indianapolis This Week. I'm Erica Fly. Have a great day.